Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Amazon Business Presents Balancing Diversity and Sustainability Goals. And before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so that you know how to participate in today's virtual event. You've joined the presentation listening through your computer speaker system by default. Throughout the presentation, you can submit questions by typing them into the questions box of your control panel, and we will address them during the Q&A portion at the end. And I would now like to introduce your host, Sherry Woods. Welcome, Sherry.
Thank you, Karina, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Sherry Woods, and I'm a field marketing leader within the Amazon Business Marketing Organization. Today's webinar focuses on the topic of balancing diversity and sustainability choices within procurement. You'll hear from peers in procurement on how they are managing their way through choices and building infrastructure to manage their goals and reporting. Before we get started, I'd like to share our legal disclaimer. The materials and information in this webinar are intended for informational purposes only. Some of the information may be dated and may not reflect the most current legal developments. Any opinions expressed on or through this webinar are the opinions of the individuals and do not reflect the opinions of Amazon Business. Now I'd like to introduce Gary Sutton from Deloitte. Gary has 19 years of sourcing and procurement consulting experience, 14 with Deloitte, 5 with the Boston Consulting Group and the Hackett Group. In those 19 years, he has served more than 40 commercial and public sector clients combined. During this time, he developed a level of sourcing and procurement expertise that makes him one of Deloitte's leading voices on the topic. His expertise has the same functional depth and cross-industry breadth that industry observers like ALM Intelligence and Gartner cite when they rank Deloitte among the global leaders in procurement operations. He brings his sourcing and procurement experience and leadership capabilities to his current role, where he is responsible for leading Deloitte's U.S. firm to the ambitious goal of spending at least $1.2 billion annually by 2025 with diverse suppliers. A subset of this goal is to spend at least $200 million annually with Black-owned, Black-led suppliers. Gary has a BA in economics from Howard University and an MBA in finance from Duke University. And now, without further ado, Mr. Gary Sutton.
Thank you, Sherry. Really appreciate the opportunity to lead this panel discussion with this very impressive group that we've assembled here today. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get right into introducing the panel. I'm going to start with Stephanie Bensmiller, who is the Director of Indirect Procurement at ABM Industries, Anthony Jenkins, the Sustainability and Federal Lead for Amazon, Bonnie Finger, the Supplier Inclusion and Diversity Manager for Bayer, and Carla Tracy Preston, Director of Global Corporate Procurement, SDI for Amazon. Welcome, everybody. Well, let's get right into it. We're going to talk a little bit about sustainability and supplier diversity. And in recent years, there's been heightened focus on the ESG movement. And companies are starting to put more energy into reporting in particular. In fact, the SEC will be rolling out new reporting requirements for companies who are making public claims about ESG. 2 of those ESG reporting metrics will be the focus of this discussion today: sustainability and supplier diversity. Well, why those 2? Well, when it comes to sustainability, Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions in particular, and supplier diversity, both involve the supply chain, and both are reported based on supplier spend. This creates a choice dynamic that many face today and many more will face on tomorrow. And that choice is, how do I prioritize where I spend my dollars? If every dollar I spend can either count toward sustainability, greenhouse gas emissions, or supplier diversity. That's what we're going to talk about here today. And maybe Stephanie, I'm going to get started right away and pose a question to you. How are you and ABM preparing to manage the pending SEC ESG reporting requirements?
Thank you, Gary. Our accounting, legal, and sustainability teams continuously monitor SEC-related regulatory developments and disclosure requirements to prepare for the upcoming release of these requirements. As the rules evolve and ABM prepares for them, we endeavor to make appropriate disclosures that reconcile the goals and metrics for our business with the SEC rules. To date, we have committed to the Science-Based Targets Initiative, setting up carbon reduction targets in alignment with the scientific methodology proposed by the Paris Agreement, along with the governance structure to define a roadmap aligned with this. We have also committed to the principle of the UN Global Compact and have performed analysis on how sustainability efforts contribute to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. ABM has established an enterprise risk management roadmap to identify, assess, quantify, and respond to risks, new threats, and opportunities that could impact the achievement of our strategic objectives. This ERM team regularly reports to the Board of Directors SER Committee that oversees efforts to mitigate the effects of compliance and financial, operational, and reputational strategic risks. From the technology side, we have implemented the Net Zero Cloud Environmental Reporting System from Salesforce, which will improve our environmental data accuracy, enabling better decision-making, improved transparency, and greater reporting scope capability. And on the reporting side, we continue to regularly report our ESG performance results to the Board of Directors and publish them annually through our ESG Impact Report, which is published in compliance with the Global Reporting Initiative and the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. This report has been verified by the Center of Sustainability Excellence. ABM will also make certain climate-related disclosures in its annual report on Form 10-K, pursuant to these impending final SEC mandatory climate rules. All of these efforts and more will position us for greater alignment with what is coming in the upcoming months from the SEC.
Unbelievable, Stephanie. Thanks for that. I see a little bit of technology, a little bit of reporting, and a little bit of governance. It sounds like you guys are well on your way. Thanks for that. And Bonnie, you guys have maybe a little bit of a different perspective with Bayer, given your global nature and the fact that you guys are a German-based company. Can you share a little bit more about how you guys are thinking about these SEC requirements?
Yeah, in terms of regulations, because Bayer is headquartered in Germany, we also have requirements in Germany with the Due Diligence Act that was just put in place in January of this year. Bayer is also committed to science-based targets. We're part of that initiative to help reduce our CO2 emissions. And there's, I think, more than 1,000 companies now have committed themselves to science-based targets and are actively addressing the challenge of climate change and setting those transparent targets that we all need that are in line with the Paris Agreement. Bayer's target is to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions in scope 1, 2, and 3 by 2050, but we hope to do it a lot sooner than that. For scope 1 and 2 emissions, those impacted by our own operations, we aim to be climate neutral by 2030. And we're currently working internally on fleet electrification and some other projects, but we're also offsetting our carbon emissions. But for scope 3, we need to have stable long-term business relationships, but we need to be sure that sustainability is a part of those relationships. And so there are 3 things that we really focus on to help improve our sustainability practices within the supply chain. The first one is our Supplier Code of Conduct. We recently made some updates to this document that's really, it forms the basis of our collaboration with suppliers, really embedding sustainability in this document. And we expect that we'll be making additional updates either later this year or next year because the landscape is changing so much in the sustainability space. And we want to be sure we have the most current information in that Supplier Code of Conduct. We also select suppliers to do sustainability evaluations, and this is really based on the combination of the country and the category that sustainability risk exists in, and as well as the strategic importance of the suppliers to Bayer. Evaluations are either done on site with audits or those online assessments that are possible, and you can do this through EcoVadis. And we expect that strategically important suppliers present an EcoVadis assessment of at least 45 of 100 points to be considered green or have a comparable audit result. And then supplier development in the area of sustainability is also critically important to us. So if there are deficiencies in those audits or evaluations, we want to put in place corrective actions to make those suppliers more sustainable. And then for supplier diversity, Bayer is already a supplier to the US government through the Veterans Administration, and we have requirements to subcontract with diverse owned suppliers. So we're already reporting to the US government through the Veterans Affairs Administration as a US government contractor. So we're committed to compliance there, in addition to any the new supplier diversity and sustainability compliance obligations we'll have with this SEC rules that come out. And some of the things that we're doing with supplier diversity that we're able to report on it and show progress is making diverse suppliers visible in our guided buying platform, improving the processes that we use to identify diverse suppliers that we can invite to our sourcing events, and increasing our engagement with NGOs that certify diverse suppliers. And all of these things will be critical for us to include in that reporting when we do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sounds like you guys have quite a bit of experience already because of your involvement with the federal government. And it also sounds like you guys are getting on board with some of the surveys that you have and some of the technologies that you guys will be using to track sustainability. Again, sounds like you guys are well on your way. Thanks for that, Bonnie. And then Anthony, a little bit more about Amazon and the focus on the SEC reporting. Any thoughts there from an Amazon perspective?
Yeah, while my peers on this call largely represent procurement organizations, I have worked in procurement, but I'm currently a product manager. And so I love the insights that we gain from procurement organizations to see how they're addressing this, because I tackle challenges around how is a supplier going to be a better supplier and help their customers succeed in these areas. And so one thing that Amazon's doing is listening to the customers like the Bonnies and the Stephanies to understand how they are approaching this. And we are committed to building tools that help customers be more compliant in their purchasing, whatever rules may come in the future. But zooming out a little bit, Amazon helped co-found the Climate Pledge, which is a commitment to be net zero carbon across our business by 2040. And some of the Climate Pledge signatories partner with us and give us feedback on the things that we're doing or not doing that can help us get closer to that. And we also publish a sustainability report very similar to other organizations that will show where we've got strengths or areas of improvement, and also where there's some gaps in the data as well. Because just like any organization, we also have suppliers that we hold to a high standard that we need to ensure that they are delivering what they need to in order for us to track Scope 3 emissions or ensure that we're improving and heading in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to move on to one of the key focus points for this conversation, and that is that issue of choice and the choice dynamic. Again, because we have the sustainability for greenhouse gas emissions in particular, and supplier diversity, both measured based on spend. There's that choice dilemma that we talked about a little bit earlier. And maybe Bonnie, we'll start with you. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how Bayer is managing through that choice dynamic.
Yeah, so it's a good question, because with all other things being equal, you want to be able to choose a sustainable and a diverse supplier. And we have top level internal goals around CO2 supplier evaluations and tier 1 diverse spend. We're only tracking those internally right now, but it's making it a higher priority internally to consider these things when making sourcing decisions. And we implemented in a pilot phase a sustainability questionnaire in our RFPs, which has been really helpful, and we're getting a lot of insight before we roll it out more broadly internally. But this questionnaire in an RFP, there are multiple sections a supplier would complete. So just a general section around sustainability, about policy, environmental programs a supplier might have, et cetera. And then we get into CO2, those science-based targets and any other commitments a supplier might have. Environmental protection includes a whole host of things, including wastewater, hazardous waste, how suppliers are managing these things. Human rights is another section that's really important to us. It's an important component of this German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act that I mentioned earlier. So child labor, forced labor, working conditions, all very important topics. But then it also includes supplier diversity. And depending on the category that's using this questionnaire and conducting the RFP, the different sections of the questionnaire have different weights. And so for one, human rights might be a more important consideration than CO2. And in another sourcing event, it might be a different balance. And so we're figuring out exactly what that looks like so that we can help evaluate, is this supplier both sustainable and able to support our supplier diversity initiatives? And this is being incorporated into the broader criteria that we use for supplier selection.
Awesome. And Stephanie, how about with ABM? How are you guys managing that choice dynamic?
As a facility service provider, we make purchases in support of and on behalf of our clients and corporate functions. While this often dictates where we purchase and what we purchase, sometimes removing the need to choose between diversity and sustainability, ABM is uniquely positioned to support and drive solutions that meet the needs of our clients, no matter which initiative has greater client priority. In 2021, ABM engaged with over 50,000 suppliers and spent more than $1 billion to provide materials and services to our clients and our own operations. 49% of that spend in services and 51% in materials. In an effort to align our supply base with both client and internal strategic initiatives, we've established the ABM Supplier Code of Conduct to align suppliers and their subcontractors providing services directly to ABM's clients with our Supplier Code of Conduct. Using environmental and social criteria for screening our suppliers and mitigating risk, ABM uses strategic supplier partnerships to provide a capable, modern supply chain that allows ABM team members to receive the same products and services to our clients and in the most responsible manner. All of this done while managing our supply base through strategic sourcing processes and risk mitigation efforts. Through the Supplier Code of Conduct, our suppliers are committed to complying with all applicable local laws, respect for human rights, environmental conservation and safety of all the products and services we provide. We are targeting 80% of our suppliers to sign the Supplier Code of Conduct by year end. As ABM continues to establish goals in both DE&I and ESG, this Supplier Code of Conduct will serve to support our efforts to reach these goals and enable us with the criteria necessary to choose the right suppliers to support both the needs of our clients and our ABM team members.
Sounds like a bit of a balanced scorecard there. A lot going on there, a large portfolio of suppliers. And it also sounds like you guys have a bit of a process that you're working there to ensure that there's good oversight in those decision-making processes. Maybe a little bit more from you, Anthony. I know from a supplier standpoint, you might have a perspective on what you're seeing as far as other suppliers that you guys work with in terms of how they're thinking about managing that choice dilemma.
Sure. Yeah, so we work with businesses of all sizes from all different verticals and industries, and they all approach it in unique ways. But nearly all customers that I've worked with are encouraged just by the enhanced availability to see small and diverse sellers spend in products with sustainability certifications in stores like Amazon Business, but also many other suppliers as well. So the data is improving where people have a little more insight into this. I mentioned Amazon itself tracks and reports on scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions in our own report, and we work to ensure that our customers who utilize us as a supplier, that we help them meet those needs as well. But some of my firsthand experience that I would point to is that many public sector customers are tracking what their baseline spend is with small businesses or on products with sustainability certifications to understand where they're at. And then once they know where they are, then they can see how that aligns with their goals. Is that good? Is that bad? Are we on track? And then they use the tools that are offered, whether on Amazon Business or other suppliers, to see if they can direct that spend towards the sellers that they want more spend with or the products that they'd like to see more of. And so I think it really is a visibility game to understand where you're at and then what tools are available to you to get closer to the goals that you have.
Yeah, that visibility is key. It's the age-old adage: if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So, real important to have that kind of visibility. And Carla, maybe a little bit more from an Amazon perspective. Can you share a little bit about Amazon SD's initiative? and how you guys might be thinking about that choice dynamic there.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting us to the panel. One of Amazon's 16 leadership principles is success and scale brings broad responsibility. We are big, we impact the world, and we recognize that we are far from perfect. So we begin each day with the determination of how we're going to make things better, how we're going to do better and be better for our customers. We have customers who are corporate. We have B2B customers, we have federal, state, and municipal customers, as well as we have the end consumer as we look at as key stakeholders. We also are looking in terms of our employees, our partners, and basically the world at a large. And so we strive, our number one leadership principle is to delight our customers and make their lives easier, whoever they are, wherever they may be. So we develop products and services that transform the way people live their lives and run their businesses. So on the side of the business that I am on the side that procures goods and services to run Amazon entities. So we are looking for diverse businesses to be part of building the future with us and also building new innovations one at a time. So our goal is to strategically source at the beginning of the process. When we first invite companies to come and submit information for an RFP or a request for proposal, we're looking at this strategically because we want to procure from qualified, competent, and competitive, underrepresented and underutilized populations. So our focus for most of last year in 2022 was to ensure that our supplier diversity and inclusion, otherwise known as SDI, our initiative aligns with industry best practices. And we use the National Minority Supplier Development Council's supplier diversity best practices as a guide, as a framework, or as I like to say, chocolate cake, supplier diversity. If you think of that, there are certain ingredients that must go into a chocolate cake, and that's what we look at as the best practices. But once you have that base chocolate cake, then you can make an even better, your version of that chocolate cake. So we accept 5 of the, we call them the gold standard, or in the industry, the gold standard certifications. We accept the National Minority Supplier Development Council, the Women's Business Enterprise National Council, the National Veterans Business Development Council, Disability In, the National Gay Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. We also accept 2 additional governmental. We accept the Department of Transportation and the Small Business Administration, SBA, 8A, and HubZone. That is consistent amongst the Amazon procurement groups. No matter if you are providing logistics, marketing, advertising, construction, data centers, and IT, those are the ones that we all are focused on. And our vision, as we all came together and said we need to really ensure that we're aligning our initiative so that we don't, this is an external facing initiative, so we want to make sure we're clear. So our vision is to build a global supplier diversity and inclusion strategy that enables long-term economic sustainability in the communities where we operate around the world. And that is where we are right now in terms of supplier diversity.
Pretty comprehensive. And by the way, it's past lunchtime here, and that chocolate cake sounds real good. We're gonna move on to the next question here, and it's actually a pretty important question. You know, underlying everything that we're talking about here is the idea of reporting, and we've already heard a little bit about some of the systems that are being used to track reporting, whether that's the reporting for greenhouse gas emissions or whether that's reporting for supplier diversity. And the question I'd like to pose to the group is, how are you building a reporting infrastructure to manage reporting for both sustainability, greenhouse gas emissions maybe in particular, and supplier diversity? And maybe Bonnie, we'll start with you.
Great, yeah, thank you for the question. And you know, Anthony mentioned visibility earlier, and that's really so important when it comes to reporting. And Bear also publishes a sustainability report. You know, we try to provide that the in-depth insight, that strategy that we're following with respect to sustainability, which includes supplier diversity, but then also how we're performing. I think it's really important for companies to provide that visibility externally, and preparing a sustainability report has really prepared us to do the kind of reporting that we need to do to governments and et cetera. And we also have a supplier sustainability database that we've implemented. It's not perfect. It's under construction. We're trying to make it better, but we're tracking the information that we believe is most relevant for our suppliers with respect to both sustainability and supplier diversity in this one system, trying to centralize as much as we possibly can. We're also adding some resources at Bear. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I post some of the open roles we have. Our team is growing. I sit in the procurement sustainability team. We're trying to focus more on supply chain decarbonization at this time, and we need additional resources to accomplish that and to be able to meet these reporting requirements that we'll have. So a lot of work being done internally to prepare us to be successful, but I think it's continuous improvement as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the database that you guys have and some of the reports that you guys are developing for the reporting, do you have a team that's focused on that activity, that's driving that whole set of activities forward?
So we do. We have there's a team of people. So some who are a little more strategic focused, others that are more operational, and we're trying to automate as much as possible, because doing this kind of work manually is not sustainable. But yeah, I think putting some additional resources here is going to help us accelerate what we're trying to achieve, but also be ready to do the reporting that we need to do.
Awesome. Stephanie, with ABM, thoughts on the infrastructure?
Certainly. ABM continues to develop and enrich our commitment to operating responsibly and leaving a healthier planet for future generations. With support of our board of directors, we continue to invest in our DE&I strategy, which is integrated with our overall ESG business objectives. We established a chief culture officer role and hired dedicated leaders for both DE&I and ESG that are leading the sea of change here at ABM that will bring all of these programs and priorities into greater strategic alignment and ensure they are integrated into our business operations. On the DE&I side, we have reestablished our team member-led, executive leader-sponsored Culture and Inclusion Council, responsible for developing organizational priorities that nurture an inclusive workplace and drive meaningful change to ensure diverse representation across all levels and industry groups here at ABM. In support of cultivating an inclusion and healthy work environment for all ABM employees, we recently launched our first ABM Impact Group, Women at ABM, which is dedicated to supporting, championing, and empowering strong female leadership, advocacy, accountability, and action within ABM. On the environmental side, the board of directors established its Stakeholder and Enterprise Risk Committee. The SER committee is comprised entirely of independent directors and is responsible for the oversight of environmental, social, and public policy matters, stakeholder impacts, and enterprise and strategic risks. The board also established an enterprise risk and management team, an ERM, that has created the ERM roadmap, updated annually, that identifies important catalysts such as climate change and their potential risk and opportunities that could impact ABM's business strategy and objectives. With the addition of the ESG manager, regularly updates are provided to the SER committee on topics including but not limited to ABM sustainability performance, our commitment to reduce our environmental footprint and reduction targets, ESG rates performance and associated improvement plans, and alignment with sustainability reporting standards and results from internal and external audits. The ESG manager develops and oversees sustainability strategy, performance and monitoring initiatives such as our Green Care portfolio of sustainable services, and reports directly to the Chief Culture and Communication Officer. In 2023, ABM will launch a cross-functional task force named the Sustainability Council, which is aimed to support ABM's carbon reduction roadmap and the development of sustainable services, completing the foundational support structure necessary to continue to drive operational excellence through sustainable practices.
Yeah, what's coming through loud and clear there, Stephanie, is governance. And governance is key to thinking about even that infrastructure that has to be put in place in order to do the reporting. And it sounds like you guys are well down the path in terms of putting that type of governance in place. And I think from an Amazon perspective, I think we've got two perspectives that we might want to hear from. And maybe Carla will maybe want to understand from an SDI perspective how you guys are thinking about laying the tracks for reporting.
Well, in terms of the supplier diversity and inclusion side, with our suppliers, we have developed reporting internally. We report it to leadership monthly, and we will be sharing our results sometime later this year for calendar year 2022. But it's all based on how do we make things much more efficient, and we make it much more technology enabled within Amazon. And so within Amazon, we are working on, again, the things that we do best: technology, governance, infrastructure, and ensuring that as we look at this, we ensure that we have robust systems, robust data that comes out of those systems, so that, again, we can ensure the integrity and validity of our data. And that is one of the reasons why we are use the highest standards, ensuring that we are using diverse companies to supply goods and services to Amazon who are certified to those certification bodies that I mentioned prior.
Awesome. And then Anthony, maybe we'll take it up a level, and maybe you've got some perspective from all the suppliers that you support, and maybe you're seeing some industry trends around how folks are thinking about doing some of that reporting.
Yeah, so as I talk with these different procurement teams and different experts across different verticals, one thing is clear is that they're all looking at regulations and planning for the future. When there's standard regulations, whether it's at the federal level or state level or whatever it may be, most people are very committed and willing to comply with those. They're just curious for additional guidance. And so I think that's one key area. But I'm also seeing that it starts with top-down goals within organizations. So you may have a president or a CEO that lays out his or her goals and visions, and then that trickles down to the procurement leaders, who often have goals that are focused on and based on diversity and sustainability metrics. So suppliers are actually playing a major role in helping these procurement organizations meet their goals. And procurement, people are realizing more and more, thankfully, that that's where the action happens, and that's where organizations get to put their money where their mouth is, and they actually make some progress that way. And so suppliers like Amazon Business, we have tools to help organizations not only report on these types of spend, but also to prefer purchases or steer purchases towards women-owned, minority-owned, or sustainable products, or whatever it may be. We're also seeing, several of the panelists have touched on annual reports to really let the public and shareholders keep them accountable. If you're going to make these big claims, you've got to be doing something to get towards that. The days of being able to greenwash or whatever you want to call it without any accountability, they're over. People are really holding these companies to a high standard, and they should. And then the final thing that I'd point out is I'm starting to see, Bonnie mentioned a supplier code of conduct, or when RFPs or RFQs are released, baking in those requirements that say, if we do business with you, you will subcontract with small businesses, or you will provide this sustainable reporting, whatever it might be that way. So we're really starting to see that baked into the requirements.
Yeah, that's an industry trend that we're seeing also. I mean, we respond to quite a few RFPs. We're seeing an increased rate of that. And naturally, you see a lot more of that, and have historically seen a lot more of that in the federal government and state and local government and higher ed. But we see that happening at a higher clip now in commercial, and we've seen that starting to ramp up over the last couple of years. And we're responding to it, and on the sales side, but even internally, we're responding to that on the procurement side and adapting some of our procedures to reflect, what's happening in the marketplace. Those are the kind of the key areas that we wanted to focus on. There are some questions, a couple questions that have come in that we want to maybe go around the horn and talk a little bit about. This first question is related to reporting. And we've heard the panelists talk a little bit about their own reporting infrastructures. And the question is, how do you get started with reporting? And you know, I'll start maybe and share a perspective from Deloitte, but would love to hear from the rest of the group in terms of, you know, how does one get started? And I know from a Deloitte perspective, we did a couple of things that I've heard talked about as we've talked on this panel. One is we started off by thinking, well, what are the specific metrics that we want to report? And then we defined the specific data elements that we knew we would need to capture from within the organization in order to do those measurements. And then we said, well, what does the actual reporting need to look like? What do the dashboards need to look like? What does the reporting cycle need to look like? How frequently do we want to communicate the information, and who do we want to communicate that information to? And do we want to ensure that we've got reliability in the data through automation? And so those were some of the things that we started to think about when we developed this centralized database. We heard that concept mentioned earlier, but we do have a centralized database where the information regarding sustainability and the information regarding supplier diversity reside. But we took a complete bottoms-up approach to figuring out what that infrastructure needs to look like. What we also did was we put some governance around it, and we created an internal ESG working group specifically designed to support how we think about doing that reporting externally. And that was our perspective. And maybe Stephanie, I'll throw the question to you. You know, how do you get started with reporting?
So at ABM, we're doing a couple of things. We're doing all of the things that you mentioned, but on top of that also is understanding your baseline. So where are you today against the goals that you want to see in the future? So one of the suggestions I have on how you get started is create governance and structure, but then you also need to understand where you are so that you know where you need to be in order to hit the goals that you've laid out for yourself.
Yeah, awesome. And Bonnie?
Yeah, Gary, you mentioned having a team that works on this, and I hadn't mentioned, but we do have a corporate sustainability function that we need to be aligned with when we do any of this tracking and reporting of sustainability topics. And so my recommendation would be to get that alignment that you need, determine who it is that you need to be aligned with within your company, start tracking. I think a baseline is critical, as Stephanie mentioned, but then also consider what is auditable. We heard Carla talking about the fact that they work with certified diverse suppliers, and I think you have those certifications. That's that auditable proof that you need to show that you're working towards your goals and achieving what you said you want to achieve. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, and then Anthony, from a supplier perspective, I mean, are you seeing any best practices emerge from some of the suppliers that you work with?
Yeah, I think there's almost an elevated relationship that's taking place between procurement and suppliers, where your suppliers can be a strategic partner with you, but there's got to be clear communication. You have to say, here's what is important to us as an organization. Maybe it's just lowest price, but more often than not, there's other things involved. And if there are other things involved, be very clear about that. And if there's gaps between where you want to go and where the suppliers are able to get you, let them know that, and let them know that when things are recompeted or other opportunities come up, what you're going to be looking for. That helps the suppliers get a fair shot at things, but it also helps them to be sharp and to add the value that you're looking for as a procurement organization.
Awesome. And then Carla, from an SDI standpoint, any thoughts on how one gets started from a reporting standpoint for supply diversity?
Definitely agree on the baselining, because if you don't know where you are, how are you going to get to where your end journey that you want to get to? So you start with baselining. You start with, how do you make this as efficient and effective as possible? Because you don't want you want to get away from manual. So that was one of the first things that we did, was we automated this process, because we have so many inputs that are coming in, whether they're from the procurement teams that are on the global corporate side, or the procurement teams in one of our other verticals. So it's really important, again, as we get this data, to baseline it, to verify it, then go back and verify it again, because we just don't take it as, you know, hey, we have a number. It's going back again and then going through a robust process where we have multiple groups that are looking at it. We have our finance analytic group who looks at it. We have a compliance group that looks at it, and of course the supplier diversity. And when those three teams come together, we can be ensured, and of course nothing is 100% perfect, but we have gone through everything that we can to, again, start with that highest level of certification, then going through and making sure through the process. And then it's also starting from, again, where does your journey start? The journey starts at the beginning. You first have to build a relationship with of the suppliers. And again, on the side that I represent, it's on the goods and services that are provided to Amazon to run our business. So we're not just going to award, a X million dollar contract just to anyone. They have to meet certain requirements besides being diverse. They still need to meet the Amazon requirements. So starting at the beginning, at the RFP process, going through, measuring again, how many suppliers have you invited? How many have made it through the rounds? Then you come to the end and it goes back to, again, those dashboards, because you want to look at multiple things. So you start from what you have, and then you try to make it as efficient and effective as possible and share that, whether you're sharing it through quarterly or monthly management reviews with various levels of management, all the way up to your senior leadership. And that's where you start, because if you don't have that commitment from multiple people, not just the procurement team, but you need the business stakeholders, you need the distribution centers, you need the data centers in our case, you need the studios. Everyone must be working together toward that goal. But first, it starts back again with, what are you trying to do and when are you trying to accomplish it by? And understanding that is how you start a reporting system that is, again, building itself up to get to the highest level of what you want to achieve.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And some of the common denominators here: baselining, knowing where you're starting, so that you can plan for where you want to go. And then this idea of automation, really important. And there's another question that's come in also that I want to build on what you were just talking about, Carla. And the question is, what are some best practices for IDing suppliers? You just talked about wanting to make sure that you've got the right suppliers on board and that you're moving forward with. Best practices from your perspective, Carla, on identifying diverse suppliers.
Absolutely. One of the things that we have made a point of doing on the Amazon procurement side is going to conferences, such as we were, recently in Nashville for the Women's Business Enterprise National Council, and they had over 4,000 women entrepreneurs there. We do matchmakers, we do webinars, we are getting out and engaging as much as we can, not just from supplier diversity, but from those decision makers, those procurement leaders, the ones who are actually managing the RFPs. And so what we look for, because we understand that an RFP could go anywhere from 6 months to over a year. So what we have been encouraging our diverse suppliers and diverse businesses who want to do business with Amazon is to be prepared. Think about going to, a restaurant. You kind of get, you know what you want to order, but you're not going to be able to order everything on the menu. You have to start in chunks. So we say, be prepared. Make sure that you are certified, in our case, to the certifications that we accept. Making sure that everyone understands this is not a one-stop shop. This is going to be a journey. So start with understanding the company that you're trying to do business with. Just to we're looking at the suppliers that we're hoping to do business with, because everyone may not have scope and scale to work directly with Amazon. But we understand that they could have a place in our supply chain, maybe at a tier 3 or tier 4, even tier 2. that means that you, again, are economically empowering your supply chain by bringing in diverse companies at the right level. You want to make sure that when you are a diverse company, you understand, again, do I need to sign a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA? What type of information do I need to provide? And what I always like to say is, don't sign up for business if you don't think that you can do it. Because, or if you want to do it and you think I'll just do it, because if you fail, that's a failure on behalf of the entire initiative. Come in at the right level. But when you do go to these conferences or do webinars and matchmakers that many companies are doing, I'm sure my colleagues on the panel, understand, who are you meeting with? Are you meeting with procurement leaders? Are you meeting with a supplier diversity? Who are you meeting with? Know your audience. Focus on your strengths. You go in and you are telling them that elevator pitch. Anticipate questions. Just don't go in and say, I hope to get 2 minutes with a decision maker. Make your, I like to say, your pitch, that elevator pitch, very specific. And what can you bring? Determine your fit. What can you bring to companies? What is going to be the uniqueness that, yes, you are diverse, but it's still a business. What are you going to bring? And then you want to ask, ask these questions earlier when you do decide to submit your info for an RFP. Make your first initial proposal your best. You may not get a second chance. And I like to tell businesses that we should not be saying a cookie cutter RFP. Each company is different. Each company has different needs, and make sure you understand your company. Make sure you're using long-term. Well, if I start here, I may start in a little bit, but where am I going to be in 3 to 5 years? And do I have scope and scale to be able to do that? Don't always go for that big piece of chocolate cake. Maybe go for a mini cupcake that you start. You want to just, again, make sure you come in right. You want to be able to say, what is the customer trying to do? What problem are they trying to resolve, and how can I help them? Those would be the things that I would recommend. Again, start with, what can you do? Be prepared. Make sure that anytime you get just a couple minutes with any decision maker in a company, have your pitch down and be ready again when you do get invited to a proposal, and take it like each time you do something, you have all the data, you're responding to questions, but also recognize these things don't happen all the time overnight. There are some cases, but be patient. Make sure you keep in contact with you, but don't overwhelm them. Just be prepared to know that things do take a little bit of time, but in the end, you're building a relationship. Because if something doesn't work out with an RFP initially, there's probably going to be something else, and you want to make sure that you have built that relationship and leave on a good relationship if you do not get selected for an RFP.
Yeah, and that's spoken with a lot of passion and a lot of experience, I'm sure, Carla. And then Bonnie, from Bear's perspective, I'm sure that you've heard a lot of things that are common to what you guys do when you think about identifying suppliers. Anything you'd like to add to that perspective?
One thing I would add, Carla mentioned all of the amazing organizations that Amazon works with, but there are others out there that may not be certifying organizations for diverse suppliers, but are consortiums of like-minded companies. So whether you're a corporation or a diverse supplier, the Diversity Alliance for Science is an organization that Bear is a member of, and this is an organization that's for advancing supplier diversity in the life sciences. So Bear has a pharmaceutical division, and that's, you see mostly pharmaceutical and healthcare companies as members of the Diversity Alliance for Science, and that works really well for Bear. Different companies will have different organizations that might make more sense for them to be a part of in order to make connections and identify diverse suppliers to invite to those sourcing events. So just look out there and see what's available and what makes sense for your company.
Yeah, thank you for that. One thing that, one theme that hasn't come up is the idea of supplier development. So if you've got suppliers that have some capability and you want to extend that capability, going through some sort of a development effort to, in essence, create that capability. Stephanie, do you guys have any kind of a focus like that in terms of how you think about identifying or growing suppliers?
We do. You know, we work with really small contractors at some of our, you know, for our subcontracting. So because we're a facilities company, we often work with really small mom and pop shops to do things like plumbing or, you know, heating and you know, windows and things like that when we have either a location in the country that we don't currently have staff for, or just to supplement our current staff. So we partner with our supply base to grow them, not only to grow their dollar spend with us, but also to align with other vendors like themselves that are possibly bigger than them to learn from. So that's one of the things that everything that was discussed previously, I agree with 100%. And we've done all of those things as well. But there's a mentorship piece that that wasn't talked too much about that I'd like to just touch on for a second.
Sure.
To help grow our supply base, we often will host conversations in the industry to help them learn from each other. I think we encourage networking, not just with the organizations that were previously mentioned by the other panelists, but also with each other.
Yeah.
I think just as a procurement professional, I know that in my own personal career, I've grown tremendously from talking to other people in my career. And so we encourage that from our smaller supply base in order to grow spend with them.
Yeah, that mentorship is key, and those relationships are really important. If I think about what we do at Deloitte in terms of how we think about developing suppliers, you know, most of where we spend our money, you know, we've got that $1 billion goal to spend at least $1 billion with total diverse suppliers, and then 200 million in particular with Black-owned suppliers. But most of that comes where we are subcontracting to support delivery to our clients. And so, you know, what our client teams have told us is that they want local relationships with suppliers that they can learn to work with over time and then ultimately to grow. And so, you know, we've put in place a program just started here in Chicago, and it is all about identifying those local suppliers that our local account teams can really begin developing relationships with. And the focus on the development is on key areas, key skills and capabilities where we know we are going to grow. And it's an opportunity to have that kind of dialogue with the suppliers where we're making certain commitments to the suppliers in terms of support we'll need from them that allows them to make investments that they're going to need to make in order for them to support our needs, and in particular, support our growth. So that whole development piece is something that we're really focused on and really looking forward to as we move our program forward. And we're going to be winding down here in a little bit, but I did want to ask one final question to all the panelists. And the question is, you know, we're in a pretty exciting time right now with supplier diversity and sustainability. The world's going to change in terms of how we view both going forward. Very exciting time. And the question is, what are you most excited about for the future? And maybe Anthony, I'll start with you.
Thanks for the question, Gary. Off the top of my head, I think the thing I'm most excited about is the realization that procurement and suppliers can really work together to tackle some of the big problems. And it's not an us versus them or a zero-sum game. That's an opportunity to recognize what's the right thing to do, or what are the clear goals, and how do we partner together to do this. And it doesn't matter who you are or what you look like or what type of organization you're in. There's opportunities for everybody to collaborate and to figure out what the best path forward is, whether it's sustainability or supplier diversity. So I think that's one of the areas that encourages me the most.
Awesome. Bonnie, what's really exciting going on at Bayer?
Yeah, you know, what I'm really excited about is the opportunity we have to really impact sustainability and supplier diversity. So climate change is critically important, and scope 3 is where we have the biggest challenges and the most opportunity. So investing efforts there is really meaningful and can be very impactful. And for supplier diversity, we'll ultimately have the impact we have, the impact we want, I should say, to achieve economic equality. I've heard it said before that equality doesn't exist until there is economic equality. And so by focusing on doing business with diverse suppliers, we'll get there eventually, right? So I'm really excited to be able to make progress on both the sustainability and the supplier diversity topics.
Awesome. And Stephanie?
I'm really excited about the councils that are being created. Procurement sits on the will be sitting on the Sustainability Council in 2023. So I'm really excited. It's that cross-functional team where we develop our strategic initiatives and further along our goals. And also the AIG groups, I briefly touched on it. Women at ABM was our first one. We are launching a veterans one this year and many more to come. I think developing that camaraderie and that innovation through all of our differences is really exciting for me personally, because I learned so much from all of these groups and can further our goals when we look at suppliers, right? Because the key is that we want our suppliers to match the diversity that we have within our organization. We're a very diverse organization, as I mentioned before, and building a foundation to have our supply base really match what we are across the country is exciting for me. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. And Carla, we'll end with Amazon and SDI. What's really got you excited for the future?
Well, exciting about all the different things that my panelists have said, and especially my colleague Anthony, that whether you're a seller or you're a supplier or you're an SDI or sustainability, there's a lot of excitement going on and a lot of initiatives. But since I started at Amazon 20 months ago, I'm just super excited about the progress we've made. We have multiple procurement teams across our enterprise, pulling everybody together to say we will do supplier diversity consistently. We understand, again, we do not want to have confusion, and we could have suppliers that provide goods and services to multiple businesses. So as an external facing initiative, we felt it was super important for us to ensure consistency and alignment. And for those of you who know Amazon, we are a very, again, large company, and with different procurement organizations pulling everyone together, it took us a little bit of time last year, but in the end, it has yielded wonderful and awesome progress. We are super excited to have had the opportunity to work closely with our sustainability team and of course our Amazon Business small community team, again, because we are looking at this holistically. Whether you are a seller or whether you're a supplier, there is opportunity for both in what we are doing and what we plan to do. We are a tech company at our heart, and we're using innovation to enhance our supplier diversity processes and our systems, putting in infrastructure. We're looking at, we talked about this, economic equity and equality. Our leadership principle of success and scale brings broad responsibility is important to our company. We have a global footprint, and we recognize that we have the opportunity to work with underrepresented groups in multiple countries, and we are taking that very seriously. We also are looking at our largest non-diverse suppliers and asking them to go on this journey with us. We started that last year because, again, we know that all underrepresented, underutilized groups may not be able to come and supply goods and services because they don't have that scope or scale. But if we have one of our larger customers who then we're asking them to spend a portion of the business that Amazon spends with them with underrepresented, underutilized, and then it keeps going down the supply chain, that is where you're going to have impact. That's where you're going to have economic equity and equality. You're going to economically empower diverse businesses, but also in the communities in which they operate, because you'll be building jobs, you'll be investing in communities, and you'll be raising to a higher level of communities that haven't had that opportunity. And that is why we're so excited And I am personally so excited, not just, again, what we're doing today, but what we're going to be doing in the future with our global partners, such as We Connect International, that is a certification body for women outside of the United States. Also with the National Minority Supplier Development, their global partners in Australia, Canada, South Africa, China, and the UK. We are just looking forward to the day where we look back and say we have built something that is sustainable. We have built a legacy of goodness, and we've built a legacy that will, again, change the lives of so many people. And that is what we are most excited about.
Well said, Carla. And, to kind of sum it up, I mean, it's all about impact, whether it's impacting the planet or whether it's impacting people. That's a lot to be excited about. Well, thank you, everybody, for participating. Bonnie, thank you so much. Stephanie, Carla, and Anthony, really appreciate having the opportunity to spend this time with you. It's been a privilege. And Sherry, I think I'll turn it back over to you.
And thank you so much, Gary. And thank you. Wow, what a great conversation with our panelists today. And thank you to our panelists for being part of this webinar as well. Before we close, I'd like to share some information about our upcoming event in November 2023. This event is the premier annual conference for smart business buying, Amazon Business Reshape 2023, designed for procurement and business leaders from diverse industries. Attendees will connect and network while having a conversation about reducing risk and achieving procurement agility, as well as adapting more easily to changing business conditions. The conference will take place November 14th and 15th in Chicago. Tickets will be on sale very soon, and you can visit business.amazon.com for more information. Thank you again for your participation in today's webinar, and have a great day.